an extremely diverse state that I don't think a lot of people appreciate. And that's one reason why I do the BioBlitz Oklahoma event, so that people can see how many species we can find in just like one state park over one weekend. Usually we get about 1,000 species.
Hi, my name is Lauren Rosenfelt. I'm a natural science illustrator and conceptual artist local to Norman. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Priscilla Crawford. Priscilla is a conservation biologist at the Oklahoma Biological Survey, a research unit at OU. Today we're going to be discussing biodiversity and its importance to sustainable ecosystems. Thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Crawford.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm very excited to be part of this project.
Well, we're happy to have you. My first question for you would be, why is biodiversity significant, and how can individuals preserve or restore it?
So biodiversity is significant because to have a resilient ecosystem, you need a lot of species that do all similar functions. So if you have a system where it's not very biodiverse, you have, say, like a field of corn. If that field of corn gets a disease, then all of the plants die in that area. And that means that whatever ate those plants now don't have food, and whatever ate those things that ate those plants don't have food. So if you have a lot of species within a system, when one dies, others can take over those functions or provide food to other species. So more diverse systems mean more resilient systems. People can do things like at their home by adding biodiversity to their landscape, or they can join organizations that promote things. There's so many good environmental organizations that promote biodiversity in the United States and globally. We have organizations within the state that will take volunteers that do biodiversity work.
So Oklahoma has over 2,500 plant species. What makes this significant compared to other states, and why would you advise that citizens and communities work together to preserve this vast biodiversity?
A lot of people think Oklahoma's boring, but Oklahoma has at least 12 different ecoregions. We go from the very southeastern part of the state that has like all Gulf coastal habitats like Louisiana, and we have alligators that breed down there, all the way to the edge of the Panhandle, where we have kind of the beginnings of the Rocky Mountains almost with the mesa lands. And the biodiversity is because we have all these ecoregions and we span this wide area that has tallgrass prairie, shortgrass prairie, eastern deciduous forests, and because we have all these ecoregions and they all kind of come together in Oklahoma, we have all these plant species, and because we have a lot of plant species, that means we have diverse animal communities as well.
What does the term kill your lawn mean, and what is the alternative to the conventional Bermuda grass or sod landscape, and what are the benefits?
It just means like getting rid of the flat, boring stuff you have to mow that really is not contributing to any sort of native biodiversity, and it's not contributing to the food shelter of our native organisms. And I'm a big proponent of removing some of that boring mowed space and adding in biodiversity. It can be a pollinator garden, it can be some native shrubs, but something that's going to provide food and shelter and places to raise young for our native wildlife. And people can easily do that. You don't have to convert your whole yard, but you can put in very tidy garden beds that have wildlife value, that promote our native pollinators and our native birds. You could also convert your whole yard into something that is not a mowed area. Sometimes people use some of the native grasses that are very short for their lawn. It's a good way to increase our urban biodiversity, which a lot of people don't think about as being really important. But the more area that becomes urban, the more we need to make sure that we're providing some habitat, because we're losing natural habitat on the outskirts.
What are prairies and why are they important? Could you briefly distinguish the difference between a prairie and a crop field?
Oh yeah, so prairies are our grasslands. within the Great Plains. So where the forests end in the east and where the mountains begin in the west, we have the prairies in between. And it's a diverse ecosystem that they originally thought was kind of a barren ecosystem, like, oh, well, trees can't grow there, that things won't grow there. So it seemed at first kind of a wasteland, but then they realized how easy it was to grow crops and to plow the prairies. They didn't have to remove the trees, and that's why the Midwest kind of became our bread basket. And so the prairies are much different than a crop field, because there's, in a square meter of a prairie you can have 40 species of plants, whereas a crop field you have one species of plant. And so again, it provides so much more habitat for native organisms versus a crop field.
What are novel ecosystems, and how has the Norman Central Library's miniature prairie habitat contributed to Norman's biodiversity?
It's kind of the concept that we have altered almost all of the world. Humans have impacted almost all habitats everywhere, and some places we've altered it so much that there's no way we can go back to what used to occur there. We've scraped off the topsoil, or we've lost species to extinction, and we have climate change happening too. So the climate is different in some of these locations. So a novel ecosystem is something where because we have impacted it, it's a novel ecosystem that never existed before we impacted it. Sometimes it has exotic species in it. Sometimes it's because the soil has changed or the hydrology's changed. I like to think of a lot of these biodiversity projects where people are replanting prairie or replanting pollinator habitats. That's not what was there before, and we are putting it in. And I like to refer to a lot of those as novel ecosystems. And what's important about a novel ecosystem is that it is functioning. It's providing function for people and for native organisms. So a novel ecosystem will provide, like for example with the pollinator library site, it's providing nectar for pollinators, our native pollinators. It's providing places to raise young by providing caterpillar host plants, and it is bringing back the biodiversity of pollinators, and then those pollinators, because they get eaten by birds, there's more birds in the area, and so it is increasing the biodiversity, but it's not exactly like it would have been 150 years ago before it was part of Norman.
Ecosystems are very complex. What positive contributions can individuals make to help their local ecosystem and thus biodiversity?
So natural ecosystems are complex, and the majority of what we have, like in our yards or in our human impacted landscape, is not complex. It's usually has many fewer species. So people can just start encouraging different species to occur in their habitat. So planting more flowers that'll attract pollinators, planting things that will produce seeds to attract native birds to the area. Those are some of the kind of simple things, and there are lots of resources online. I highly recommend people who want to add some more biodiversity to their landscaping to go to the Okies for Monarchs webpage. That's one of my favorite web pages. The Okies for Monarchs has some really great information on how to increase the biodiversity of your area.
Well, thank you, Priscilla, for being with us today and sharing your knowledge.
I am so happy that you asked me to be part of this project. It's very exciting, and I'm so glad that Norman is interested in doing pollinator habitats at public spaces, and I hope that that's a continuing trend and we can really promote pollinators and natural habitats in the city.